Hi everyone, it's me, Arielle, and it's Wednesday Warriors. And this week I'm going to be talking about a very specific topic that I think is really interesting. I'm going to be talking about vegetarianism and forms of vegetarianism like veganism, things like that, and how that can mask an eating disorder, how it can play a part in hindering eating disorder recovery, and how a lot of the time people may cling to a form of vegetarianism as a lifestyle choice, but really not do it healthfully, because what they're really trying to do is restrict and appear normal while suffering from an eating disorder. Sometimes this is done intentionally, sometimes it's done very unintentionally, and I will tell you my personal experience with this. I'm also going to be talking about vegetarianism that is healthy and what that entails, and certainly people who have an eating disorder history and are vegetarians are not necessarily being unhealthy. There are many very healthy vegetarians who have a history of an eating disorder, who are in recovery or who consider themselves recovered, who are doing very well and using vegetarianism as a lifestyle choice and doing everything the right way and getting all their nutrients and getting everything that they need. It's just important to recognize the difference between the two. And with my personal experience, back when I was a kid, I became a vegetarian when I was 11. And it was, now looking back on it, a response to something that had happened to me. It wasn't really a lifestyle choice, and it wasn't something that I did for the right reasons. If you had asked me when I was 11 why I was a vegetarian, I wouldn't have said because I don't believe in eating animals, or I wouldn't have said anything to do with animal rights. I wouldn't have said because I dislike meat. I wouldn't have had a reason for you. And if I did have a reason, it wouldn't have been a very valid one. It probably would have seemed rather flimsy. At the time, being a young adolescent, I was just thinking that I was going to do something cool and special and become a vegetarian. What I didn't do was supplement all of the things that I was missing when I cut meat out of my diet. I didn't do it a healthy way. I wasn't a healthy vegetarian. How I usually explain it is, for example, if my family was eating green beans, a baked potato, and a piece of chicken for dinner, I only ate a baked potato and green beans for dinner. I simply cut out the meat aspect of every meal. Similarly, if, for lunch, I would have a sandwich with meat in it and a bag of chips and a piece of fruit. I would only eat a piece of fruit and a bag of chips, and I would just cut out the sandwich. So it was a very unhealthy way of doing things, and technically, I suppose I was a vegetarian because I did not eat any meat, but it wasn't done for the right reasons, and it wasn't done the right way. Back then, I thought I was just doing it because I wanted to do it, and looking back, and after years of therapy, when I was maybe 18, 19, 20, 21, around that age, I realized that becoming a vegetarian at age 11 was actually a response to something that had happened to me. And the something that had happened to me was bullying, and I was shunned by almost my entire grade of girls. And it was a really hard, traumatizing time for me because I didn't have anyone. And I used to come home every day and cry, and I was treated horribly. And, there are a lot of details to this scenario, but it was a really bad year. The year that I was 11 was hard, and it was then that I decided to be a vegetarian, and it was just kind of like a snap. All of a sudden, that was my response. That's what I decided to do. And at the time, the two didn't seem related to me, and they certainly weren't related in my mind, but looking back, I can kind of understand. And as I said, in one respect, it was to feel special and feel cool and do something different and sort of have that little piece that made me special by becoming a vegetarian when I didn't know anyone who was. But part of it was control and being able to control my life when a lot of it was out of control, and I did it with food. And even though I didn't probably have all of the criteria for anorexia at that point, that is when my eating disorder began, when I was 11. I didn't get diagnosed with anorexia nervosa till I was 18 years old, but my eating disorder definitely began long before that, and I sort of consider that the starting point because I was eating nowhere close to what I needed to be eating for my age, height, and weight. And I was very, very thin, definitely underweight for my age and for my height. And my eating habits were just very weird and very restrictive. And because I could pass it off as vegetarianism, it didn't send up the red flags that it should have to the adults in my life. So my experience like that is an example of when you may consider yourself a vegetarian and not realize that you're not doing it healthfully and not realize that it is playing a part in your eating disorder. I definitely didn't intentionally do that to help my eating disorder along. I didn't even give much thought to eating disorders back then, didn't think I had one. It wasn't even in my vocabulary, but it was part of it. And I stayed a vegetarian from age 11 to age 15 because at age 15, things in my life started getting a lot better. And school was much, much better, and life was better in general. And I had, a ton of friendships. I was very popular. I had a boyfriend, and I was happy for all intents and purposes. So basically, it seemed natural for that vegetarianism piece to go away when I'm looking back on it in hindsight. At the time, it was very odd. I hung up the phone, I think, with my boyfriend at the time when I was 15 and said to my mom that I wanted a cheeseburger for dinner when I hadn't had any meat since I was 11 years old. And, from that day on, I just started eating meat again, and I still eat meat to this day. But it wasn't fitting to any situation. It's only looking back that I can see everything in my life became okay again, and I didn't feel the need to control, I guess, and I didn't feel the need to be a vegetarian any longer, so I just stopped being one. And to me, when I'm able to look at it with my therapist eye and, my support group leader eye and my introspective eye, I can see that it was eating disordered behavior, but I couldn't see that then, and no one in my life could either. The point of me telling you that story is just so that you become more aware of everything in your life and become more aware of your own habits and your own thoughts and your own choices, because I think a lot of the time we feel that if we're making our own choices, we really can't be doing anything wrong because we're listening to ourselves and we're using our own mind. But if you take the time to think of all the things surrounding you in your life and how those things, good or bad, may influence the choices that you're making, I think it can tell you a lot about yourself and a lot about your behavior, and if that behavior is good or bad, what triggers you, what is a support to you. And again, certainly if you're a vegetarian and you're being a healthy one, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And I think vegetarianism is a perfectly healthy choice as long as you are including all of the things that need to be included. And a lot of people, especially I find teenagers that decide to become vegetarians, a lot of teenagers, they forget what constitutes real vegetarianism, and they do something along the lines of what I did, and they just cut out all meat products. And that's really not what it's about. Because you still need protein, you still need nutrients, you still need vitamins, you still need all of the things that meat has with it, but that other things out there that are not meat products can give you as well. And a lot of the time when you are a vegetarian or you are a vegan, you need to be even more aware of what your body needs to maintain nutrition, because it can be harder to maintain healthy nutrition when you are cutting things out that are typically mainstream, I guess. I think it's easier nowadays to be a vegetarian or a vegan because things are more accessible and they're more advertised, and there's certainly more products in the stores. Obviously, some things, especially if they're organic and things like that, are pretty expensive. But when I was younger, when I was a teenager and I was a vegetarian, it wasn't like that. They didn't have other options. They didn't have alternatives for people who didn't eat meat. I guess you just want to ask yourself if you're using vegetarianism as a crutch in order to enable your eating disorder, or if you're doing it because you really feel strongly about it. If you really feel that it's a healthier lifestyle for you, or if you feel that being a vegetarian goes along with your personal beliefs regarding animals, or if you just don't like the taste of meat, and you can get your nutrients from other sources. That's perfectly fine. I think a lot of thought has to go into it. A lot of thought may not appear to go into the choice itself, but a lot of thought has to go into your balanced diet. And it doesn't mean you have to put extra thought into it every day, and after a while it does sort of become second nature, but just to make sure that you assess yourself and you make sure you're doing everything for the right reasons and the way that you should. I think a lot of the time we react to our environment without even knowing that we're reacting to our environment. And that's what happened to me. And I can see it now. I couldn't see it then. So it's important to draw back and look at your situation with clear eyes and pretend that you're a third party and not yourself. And just examine everything that's going on in your life and make sure you're doing everything for the right reasons. I'm going to put some links in the info box about vegetarianism and veganism and healthy ways of doing it and what it entails, and other informative places that you can go for more information. And I really hope that you guys are having a great week. I will see you next time.